Welcome to Phillip Island, Victoria in Australia. What a setting we have for this great sporting contest, the Little Penguin Sea to Dune race. Nervous moments always as they gather on the beach, the tension mounting, and away they go. There's the defending champion, wearing his familiar navy blue and white, great waddling style. Another pre-race favourite though, losing touch with the pack. Maybe that's why. A few too many fish in the day's feeding. There's a familiar face, Skip McIntyre, 8 times a champion back in the 90s, a very successful coach now, keeping a keen eye on proceedings. This the leading group, 1 or 2 still able to put on a show for the camera, others just ploughing straight over it. Some resorting to shortcuts. Sad that cheating has crept into this beautiful sport. The judges will have a look at that. But up at the front, the pace is relentless, closing in on those sand dunes that will offer a bed for the night. The fatigue starting to tell. Who's got the finishing kick up on the outside? What a turn of pace from that one, whichever one it is. No answer from the rest, and he takes victory. What a win. There we are, into the Burrow, building an extension with his winnings, and back tomorrow to try and defend his title here on Phillip Island.
Good evening and welcome to Live Penguin TV. My name's Megan and I'm going to be your host tonight as we watch the world's smallest species of penguin, our little penguins coming out of the water, crossing the beach and heading back to their burrows here on Phillip Island in Victoria, Australia. And I see some of our regular viewers in the comments trying to guess who's going to be on tonight. And I can confidently say that you're all wrong because in her live stream debut, joining me tonight, I have Danny. Come on in, tell us what you'll be doing tonight.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Live Penguin TV this evening. My name is Danny and I'm going to be monitoring all of your questions on Facebook and YouTube, so send us through all of your questions. We will try our best to answer them. And we do just want to give a really big shout out this evening to the grade 5s and 6s from Whittlesea Primary School. We're really sorry that you couldn't be here with us in person, but we hope you enjoy our live stream. And get all of those guesses in for our penguin numbers for Saturday night, and we'll be announcing them shortly. Thanks, Megan.
Great. Thanks, Danny. And welcome to all of our lovely grade 5s and 6s from Whittlesea Primary School. Hope you're excited to see some penguins. Now, we are watching our little penguins here on the land of the Burrow here on Phillip Island, or Milau as it's also known. So I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Burrow of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging as the traditional custodians, and for all the care for country they've undertaken for thousands and thousands of years. And I would like you all to let us know where you're viewing from tonight, and if you do know who the traditional custodians are of the land you're on, let us know in the comments as well. And I can't ignore it any longer. There are a few little penguins at the edge of the water. Well, there might be some if I move the camera over to the left a little bit, hanging out. Oh, there's actually quite a few. There's more than I expected. Hanging out just in the water there. But they're not going to cross right away, because what we're seeing tonight is the most scary and the most dangerous part of our penguins' day. Crossing the beach is when they're the most vulnerable to predators, so they're going to be a little bit nervous, and that's why they're waiting for a little bit before they do cross, because they are quite early tonight compared to what we expected. And they have a decent sized group there, so hopefully they don't wait too long, but they are vulnerable to birds of prey when they're here on land. They do spend 80% of their time out at sea, and when they're out there, they're really well camouflaged with their blue back blending in really well with the ocean, and their little white tummy blending in with the sky. So they're really hard to see whether you're an aerial predator or a marine predator in the ocean. You're not going to have much luck trying to catch a little penguin. But as you can see, as soon as they pop up out of the water there, they are quite conspicuous and easy to see for predators. So they're coming in these groups for safety in numbers as they cross the beach, and they're waiting until it gets a little bit darker. So once it gets dark, those birds of prey, we have things like Pacific gulls, sea eagles, swamp harriers around Phillip Island here. They should go to roost for the night. It's too dark to hunt, and that's when it's safest for the penguins to cross the beach. So the penguins have been gathering offshore for the last couple of hours, and this group at least have decided that now's their chance to come up onto land, and maybe it'll be safe to cross. But most of our penguins are a little bit more cautious, waiting a little bit before they come out of the water. Even these guys aren't quite sure yet, going in and out, making sure the coast is clear before they cross. And if they're not sure, they're going to be in the water, having a look around, making sure it is as safe as possible before they cross the beach. And if you were down there on the beach tonight, you'll be able to hear them talking to each other, calling out to their group to come together to get ready to cross. And I think all of you know quite well the noise that they make. But if you haven't seen our little penguins before, if you haven't watched live penguin TV, they make a noise that we call a huck. So they sound kind of like ducks quacking. So they go huck, huck. I hope all the students from Whittlesea Primary School and all of our viewers at home can have a go at hucking. I'll do it again, and I'll get Danny to do it, and we'll get you all at home to join in if you can go. And if you have some people living with you and they're wondering what on earth is going on, teach them how to make a huck, and maybe you can use that around your house. You know, if you want someone to come and help you with something, just huck, and maybe they'll huck back and they'll come and join you in your raft. And we do call a group of penguins in the water a raft. And when they come up onto land, we like to call them a waddle of penguins. So we have, I'm not sure if they're a raft or a waddle right now. They're kind of going between the two. I think sometimes we might call them a roddle or a waft. What do you think, Danny?
I think a waft.
A waft?
A waft of penguins.
Oh dear. Where are our... Oops. Sorry. The camera has a bit of a mind of its own tonight. Let's go back, please. We have been having a few technical difficulties with the camera, so I'll do my best to try and keep it on the penguins, but bear with me. If we lose them, there they are. They look like they're thinking more and more about crossing the beach. And if you did watch the live stream on Saturday night, we had lots of guesses as to how many penguins came in on Saturday, Danny?
We have had lots and lots of guesses, and there's been quite a few high ones. But in fact, there were 701 penguins that crossed the beach on Saturday night.
701, and I think we had quite a few more last night. Do you know how many we had last night, Danny?
We sure did. I was down helping count on the beach last night, and there was 1,299 penguins.
Whoa!
Last night. So
big penguin numbers.
Lots of penguins
night.
coming in.
And I might hazard a guess as to what's going on with those increased numbers, if I will. Because our penguins are in their breeding season right now, we did have a lot of penguins sitting on eggs. So most of our penguins are in their burrows, incubating 2 little eggs, swapping over. At the moment, they've been doing between 4 and 8 day trips during their incubation, and then they've been swapping over. But last week, we had a lot of eggs hatched down here at the Penguin Parade. And I'm sure throughout the colony, which means our penguins have little tiny chicks to feed. And when the chicks first hatch, they weigh only about 35 grams. They're about the size of your palm. They're teeny tiny. They can't even hold their heads up. And they need a parent to stay at home with them. And they need food constantly. So one parent will stay in the burrow, giving them little bits of food all day, but that means that the other parent has to be out at sea, and they have to swap over every single day. So that means the penguins are doing shorter trips and they're coming back more often. So maybe that's why we've seen a bit of an increase in penguin numbers, would be my guess, is that a lot of them are in that guard mode of feeding their chicks every day. So we'll have more penguins coming in and crossing the beach, because they definitely don't do this every day. This time of year is when you'll be lucky to see the most penguins crossing the beach, when they do have to come in often to feed those chicks. But if you were to come here in winter, they can be spending up to a month out at sea. They can be spending a long time out there. It's what they're best at doing. So you may only see a few hundred penguins in winter, whereas in a really good breeding season in the middle of summer, as we get further into that season, we may be seeing not just 1, but 2 or maybe even 3,000 penguins. There was one night just before I started here at the Penguin Parade where we had 4,398 penguins cross the beach, which was insane. But I just started, so I thought, 3,000 penguins a night was normal, which it isn't. So normally over 1,000 is pretty good. So hopefully we'll see that tonight. And here at the Penguin Parade is only about 10% of our entire penguin colony. So we do have around 32,000 penguins, maybe even a few more adult breeding penguins in our colony here on Phillip Island. It is the largest colony of little penguins. Little penguins are only found in Australia and New Zealand, and they are the smallest of all 18 species of penguin. So if you're thinking they're looking really small on the screen, it's not just because they are far away, it is because they are only about a foot tall and they only weigh about 1 kilo. So they are the littlest species of penguin, the only type we have here in Australia. And we're lucky enough to have the largest colony here on Phillip Island, and all of that colony is managed by Phillip Island Nature Parks, which is who we are, and we're a non-for-profit conservation organisation. So very soon, we do hope that you'll be able to come and visit us if you haven't already, because if you do buy a ticket to the Penguin Parade or the Koala Reserve, Churchill Island Heritage Farm, the Nobby's Antarctic Journey, or if you buy a souvenir or food and drinks from us, that profit does go right back towards conservation, education and research. And it helps care for not just our little penguins, but all of our beautiful wildlife and wild places here on Phillip Island. So we do really hope to see people back here soon. We do have regional Victorians visiting, but we are hopeful for the rest of the state and the rest of the country and the rest of the world to be able to visit us pretty soon. And if you can't come visit us, you can help out by donating to the Penguin Foundation. You can adopt a penguin, adopt a goose, adopt any animal you like, or just make a donation to help look after our wonderful wildlife here on Phillip Island. And that also goes towards our wildlife hospital, where we do look after sick and injured wildlife for rehabilitation and release back into the wild. And these little guys, they're making us wait. What are you guys doing? They're just hanging out. And it is rainy. It looks like it's gotten quite dark now. And I think, was this around the same time they crossed last night, Danny?
Yeah, it was 8:09 last night.
8:09 last night. But it looks like it started to rain. The clouds have rolled in. Oh, and I think maybe the penguins are feeling confident. Let's see. Let's try and follow them over. On the right hand side, come on camera, follow the penguins. Yes, they look like they're building up the courage. And there is no leader in a waddle of penguins. It just takes a few brave penguins to start going, and then the rest of them will follow. Alternatively, it might just take 1 or 2 scared penguins to run back, and the rest of them are like, oh, there's something scary, quick, get back in the water. And if they do that, that might be if they've seen a bird fly overhead, and it doesn't even have to be a bird of prey. Any bird will give them a fright, because they do have to be really cautious as they are so vulnerable crossing the beach here. And we have had a pair of white-bellied sea eagles hanging around along the peninsula lately. And I saw one of them today, and they're beautiful big birds that I love to watch, and you can keep an eye out for if you do visit us here during the day, but not something that a penguin wants to have a run-in with as they're trying to cross the beach. So that's why they're so nervous. But I think they're building up the courage, and we might have a small group. Have we had a start yet, Danny?
We have had a start. It was actually on the east side of the beach, which was the same as last night, which is very interesting.
That's a bit unusual.
It is, but hopefully these guys will.
That's okay. We'll wait for you guys. You can do it. You can get there. And we do have 5 penguin pathways all along Summerlands Beach here where we are watching the penguins from. And the pathway we're watching is where about 60% of the penguins usually come up. So that's why we usually see the first groups here. But occasionally they do keep us guessing and they come up a bit further along the beach. First, depends on who's the most keen to get home. Maybe the penguins up to the east had some more hungry little chicks to get home to, and these guys aren't in as much of a rush. Try and follow them through the bushes here. Come on, little penguins. And I think they're getting up onto the rocks. And we have a couple of Cape Barren geese just up here in the bushes having a bit of a snooze. Hopefully they're not going to come down and bother our penguins. And I think we all love the geese. If you haven't seen our Cape Barren geese before, they're quite funny birds. They are the second rarest species of goose in the world. So we are very fortunate to have several thousand of them living here on Phillip Island. And they don't pose any real threat to the penguins, but sometimes they do like to stand in the middle of a penguin pathway. And the penguins and geese, they won't hurt each other, but they're not friends. They don't like to be in close quarters, so they will try to avoid each other. But it looks like those geese are just going to have a little nap up there in the bushes and leave our penguins on their way home. And you'll notice as soon as they get up over these rocks, they've made it across the beach. They can breathe a sigh of relief and they can make their way home. They might have a bit of a rest, but it looks like they're in a rush tonight, heading straight through this big pond that we have. We've had the pond here for a little bit, but we've had quite a bit of rain recently. The pond has kind of formed a river flowing out to the ocean. And that river flows from Swan Lake, which is a beautiful place where if you want to go bird watching, Swan Lake is lovely. And there are actually eels that migrate from Swan Lake down the creek and out to the ocean. But I love that we're able to see these little guys so close swimming, and we have some penguins on the highway. And I love the highway view because you get to see all their funny little waddles, because I feel like they all have different personalities. They all have a kind of different way that they walk, a different attitude. Some of them are really confident, like that one there, flopping his flippers, looking good, puffing his chest out. And some of them are a bit more nervous, like that one walking past him, leaning close, having a bit of a look around. Not quite as sure in himself, but that's more penguins than I reckon I saw across the beach. I think they've done a bit of a sneaky and gone up through the vegetation, and we've missed some of them, but I'm glad we get to see them all now nice and up close, waddling past the camera. And I reckon I can even see some penguins with you might see a little line on their belly. And if there's a little line where their feathers are kind of parting, that might be a sign that they're sitting on eggs, because they do have a thing called a brood patch. And when they're sitting on eggs, they'll part their feathers right on their little belly there, so they can press their skin directly against the eggs to help keep them nice and warm. So if you see a little line through their feathers, like I think that one kind of in the middle at the back might have, if I'm not seeing things, then they might be sitting on eggs. And I think a lot of our Thank you. Sorry. The technology is not my friend tonight, which I was saying without having the microphone on, which happened when everything just closed on me and I had to reopen it. But we're back in time to talk about this guy, Romeo, I'm guessing, trying to woo all the ladies on the highway. I don't think she's interested. And this is the thing that I love about penguin mating. Maybe the kids should look away. So this is a bit of a courtship display. The males flap their flippers and do a dance to try and impress the females. And if the female's not interested, all she has to do is stand up straight. There's nothing he can do about it. So he tried and failed. But that penguin that was walking the wrong way, which what I was trying to talk about before, we might go back to the main camera and give Romeo some privacy. But the one walking the wrong way was what we call a shell gritter. So that's a female penguin getting ready to lay eggs. So probably within a couple days, she's going to lay those eggs, and it takes a lot of calcium to put into the shell. So she goes out to the beach at night to eat little pieces of shell to get extra calcium to help restore those calcium stores, because sometimes she'll have to take the calcium right out of her bones. So she wants to eat as much calcium as she can if she's getting deficient to try and replace those calcium stores. So it's kind of like a pregnancy craving, and I think there was 2 that I saw. So sometimes they walk out in a little mothers group, and we have another nice big group on the highway. And I think maybe we'll grab a question while we're watching these guys, Danny.
Before we grab a question, we do have another shout out to our Year 4 students from Apollo Parksway Primary School in Greensborough, who are also meant to be here with us tonight, and they've actually adopted a penguin and named it Rocky.
Hey guys, hey Rocky the penguin.
Hopefully Rocky's coming up tonight to look after their eggs and chicks that may be in the colony.
Oh, I'm sure Rocky is a great dad.
We have had some pretty good questions. We've got a question from Sar, and it's, can the chicks and the parents recognise each other by their call once the chicks have fledged and then returned back home?
Oh, that's a good question. And I don't know if that's something we really know the answer to. They definitely know their calls when the chicks are young, and they have to rely on calling out to mum and dad so that they can find each other for food. And the partners recognise each other so that they can call out and find each other so that they can rekindle those pair bonds if they want to stay together year after year. But I don't know that there's any recognition of those chicks once they fledge and come back, because when they head out to sea, they're only about 8 to 10 weeks old, and then once they're big enough, mum and dad just stop coming back to feed them. And then once they're big enough, they figure out that it's time for them to go out to sea and find their own food. So it's a bit of harsh parenting. They kind of have to go out and figure out how to be a penguin on their own, and then they're out at sea for their whole first year of life before they come back. And they only really come back maybe once or twice after that first year. They come and just check out what's going on land, and then they'll go out for most of that second year, and then they'll come back after 2 years to breed. So they've spent a long time out at sea, and their parents have potentially had, they've had 2 more breeding seasons, so they could have had 2, 3, 4, even more chicks since then. So I think even if they could remember what their chicks' calls were, I don't know if they would, if you're having so many chicks each season. So I don't know if there's any real mechanism to prevent inbreeding, and I know we've been asked that before, if there's any way to prevent inbreeding, because the chicks do typically come back to where they were born to breed. But I was talking to one of our penguin research officers who was saying that in birds, inbreeding isn't really a big problem. Their genetics are a little bit different to mammals, so it's not as big of a concern in our birds, like our little penguins, if there's possible inbreeding. So it's not a big thing that they have to have strategies to avoid. So I don't know the answer to your question, coming back to that, but I would say that they probably don't, would be my best guess. But I don't think we know, or we're probably not ever going to know. It would be something very, very difficult to test. I don't know of any way that I can think of that you'd be able to effectively look at that. But we have another nice big group coming in, and again, I love watching them swimming through the little pond here. And when you do see so much water around at the moment, keep your eyes peeled for some ricali, so water rats. And I know we have a new Burrow cam, and I'm sure that's probably been talked about since I've last been on. And let me see. Oh, that's me. Let me see if I can pop the Burrow cam up. And there's no one inside, but there is that poor abandoned little egg from that probably a young female who was probably a first-time breeder, didn't quite know what she's doing. She's found an empty burrow and she's laid an egg on accident. And there was a Ricali that came in and was trying to have a bit of a munch on that egg. So the Ricali aren't an animal that would take on an adult penguin. They are kind of scavengers, or they'll hunt and eat fish and things like that. So if you see a water rat, they're a beautiful native species. They're not anything to be ewing over or anything to be concerned about with our little penguins. And oh, I was too slow for these ones on the highway, but let's try and get a better look at these ones over on the rocks, having a bit of a rest. And I've noticed that the penguins aren't trying to walk up where that river is. They're smart. They're going around. They do usually take the same track back home each time they come back onto land, but they can adapt and they can work around changes in the environment. And when we have so much rain, we do have a lot of changes. We have the water cutting through the landscape. We have the big tides coming in and moving the sand around. So although the penguins sometimes might look a little bit confused if something changes because they're looking for their landmark and their pathway to find their way, they can adapt and learn, and they will still find their way back home. And some of them will have to walk up to 2 kilometers to get back home. So I don't blame them for wanting to stop and have a little bit of a rest. And if you've been out at sea for a while, they still want to make sure their feathers are nice and sleek. They have about 10,000 teeny tiny feathers on each of these penguins. So when they're up on the rocks resting here, they're doing a little bit of preening, realigning those feathers, maybe getting a little bit of oil from the oil gland under their tail and putting that through their feathers to make sure they're nicely conditioned and they'll still fit all nicely together. Because if you're a penguin, your feathers are probably one of the most important things to you out at sea. They actually stop water touching your skin. So if your feathers aren't properly preened and water gets through your feathers, you're gonna get really cold and you could even drown. So feathers and preening are really, really important for these little guys. And they don't get cold out in the water, no matter how chilly it is in the waters around southern Australia here. And trust me, it can get pretty chilly because that outer layer keeps them dry, and then underneath that they have a fluffy downy layer that will keep them warm and traps a layer of air against their skin to keep them buoyant. Because as you can imagine, if the penguins aren't coming onto land every day, they've got to sleep somewhere. So when they're sleeping out at sea, that buoyant layer helps them float on the surface without having to paddle to stay floating on top there. And they'll only sleep for about 4 minutes at a time, which I think is pretty incredible. And I wish I could do that. That would be really handy. Little 4 minute sleep and then keep going. We have heaps of penguins. I think we're going to have good numbers again tonight. We do have Ranger Sally counting the penguins tonight as they're crossing the beach. Sorry, I just noticed the penguin who was walking really funny on the highway. I'm a little bit too slow to follow him, so I hope you saw him. So Sally's doing her best to count every penguin as they cross the beach. So if you want to give her a hand, try and count the next group as they come up onto the rocks. And at the end of the night, let us know how many penguins you think have come home. And while we're watching these guys, we'll grab another question, Danny.
We've had quite a few questions, and one of them was, how old do little penguins get?
Okay. So the average age for our little penguins here on Phillip Island, so when I'm saying numbers and facts, it's mostly from what we've learned from our penguins here on Phillip Island. It does vary kind of colony to colony, but the average age for our penguins is usually around 7 years old. But that average is brought down by quite a high mortality in their first year. Because as I said before, harsh parenting. Mum and dad don't teach the baby penguins how to be a penguin. So it is the strongest ones that survive. But once they figure out how to be a penguin and find food, and they get really good at that, they can usually live into their teens. But the oldest penguin we've ever had here lived to be about 26 years old. So they can get pretty old, and I believe that penguin kept breeding right up until she was last seen. So if you think about a penguin living to 26 years old, if she's having just one chick every year, she's doing pretty well in contributing to our penguin colony here on Phillip Island, which is doing really well. And then a small number of those penguins that fledge do actually end up living elsewhere. So that helps establish other penguin colonies in other areas nearby, like our little penguin colony that some of you might have heard of that lives near the city in St Kilda in Melbourne. And they took up residence on a man-made breakwater, which was a wall of rocks that was built for the Olympics in Melbourne to shelter the yachts. And then some penguins from Phillip Island were fishing in Port Phillip Bay and came across it and thought it would make a good place to make their burrows in between the rocks. And now I think last I heard there's about 1,500 penguins that live there. So they are quite adaptable, not just in finding their way home, but even where they're burrowing. So you might see a lot of different types of burrows around here on Phillip Island. I might even zoom over and see if I can find some penguins at their burrows. And we do have natural burrows the penguins dig in the ground. They might even make their burrows in some rocks or under some vegetation. And we do have little wooden boxes that we put out for them to help them live in places that have been disturbed by people. And the wooden boxes with the numbers, there's like a little penguin couple home at their burrow. The ones with the numbers are our study burrows. And I did have a chat to one of our penguin researchers and we looked at the data to see if there were any penguin chicks in these burrows. And there was one burrow that has older chicks who might be outside waiting for mum and dad to come home. So let's have a little bit of a look and see. Oh, and there's another shell gritter up on the highway. I'm going to get distracted for a moment and look at the little shell gritter making her way out to the beach to eat the shell. And they sometimes get a little bit confused with the other penguins walking at them, trying to get through. The other penguins are kind of like, hey, where are you going? You're meant to be going that way. And she's like, no, I need to get to the beach. I need to eat the shells. I'm craving shells. Oh, and there is a chunky penguin who's looking like he's having a bit of trouble walking, which I must say is perfectly normal. We do keep an eye on any penguins if they do have a bit of a limp, but we do have quite a few that have old injuries or just maybe not as fit as all the others. So that penguin looks very fat. He actually looks fatter than all the others and healthy. So if we have a fat, healthy penguin, he's gonna, I thought he was gonna have a rest. No, he's determined. And they're moving well, they're going to make their way home. We won't interfere. If he did have a noticeable wound or injury or something wrapped around his foot, we would catch him and take him to the wildlife hospital. But that doesn't appear to be the case. He looks fat and healthy and he's going to make his way home. So we'll leave him be, especially in the breeding season. It is really important that we remember these are wild animals and they are going home to eggs or chicks, so we don't want to interfere because we could be stopping them going home to those chicks who depend upon them. And I'm not having much luck. The grass is really long from all the rain we've had, so I don't think I'm going to be able to find any little penguin chicks in the bushes. But we can see some more penguins on the highway. And Danny's already told me we're running out of time, so maybe we'll grab a couple more questions.
We have Evan who would like to know, what is the penguin's main food source?
Good question, Evan. So the penguins, the reason they go out to sea is to look for food. So their main food source is small fish. So things like anchovies, pilchards, jellyfish, squid, anything pretty much that they can fit into their little mouths, they'll make into a snack, but it's all a seafood diet. They're strictly carnivores, so they don't eat anything when they're on land. They'll only eat when they're out at sea. So the sea is like their supermarket. Just watching that adorable penguin. I'm not sure if it's calling or yawning. Sometimes they do a funny little like yawning thing, but it seems like he's been told to hurry up. That's they're not very polite, the penguins. If someone's standing in the middle of the highway, they're gonna get knocked into.
He's just enjoying his camera time.
Oh yeah, he was just a bit of a show off. I got distracted. Did I answer the question?
Yep.
Okay,
so, main food source.
Yes, perfect. That's the one. All right, I'll make them my way back with the camera and we'll grab one more question, I think, before we finish up, Danny.
We have a question from Kerry, and she would like to know, how long does it take before a penguin reaches sexual maturity?
Oh, okay. So I think I talked about this a little earlier. It usually takes 2 to 3 years. So I believe the females sometimes a little bit earlier than the males, but usually between 2 to 3 years old. Maybe sometimes a little bit younger if there's not a heap of competition. But I would say usually 2 years old is when they're going to come back and start to breed for the first time. And we have learnt through our research here on Phillip Island that the more experienced penguin is at breeding, typically the better they're going to do, which is why that abandoned egg in the Burrow cam, that's why we thought maybe that one will be a young female who's not quite sure what she's doing. She might not know all the signs and signals and the intricacies of breeding. She might have met a nice male and done a little bit of courtship and special penguin cuddles, and then she didn't quite know what to do when she was getting ready to lay her egg. So once they get older, they do tend to get better and more successful at breeding. They kind of know what they're doing a little bit better. But yeah, usually from about 2 years old, they'll start breeding. So a good successful penguin can raise a lot of chicks in their lifetime, and then those fittest ones are going to survive. And they may keep the same partner if they're doing well year after year. So there is one of our study sites that I go out and do a bit of research work in, and there's 2 penguin pairs that I was checking on today who are the same pairs as last year, and they did really well last year. Last year was a terrific breeding season, so that's when we usually see lower what we call divorce rates. So if penguins do well, they're more likely to stay together with their partner. If they don't do so well, they might kind of blame their partner and decide to find someone else for the next season in the hopes of doing a little bit better at raising chicks. So that divorce rate is usually somewhere between 18 to 50% for our little penguins. So I'm sorry to say they don't mate for life. They are socially monogamous. They do stay in the same burrow with the same partner for a season, but they do cheat on their partners, and you know that's what little old Romeo was trying to do out on the highway earlier. So yes, if you do come and visit us this time of year, it's when love is in the air, and you might see a little bit of that going on, some special penguin cuddles. And there'll still be penguins crossing the beach, but we have been going, I think, for we've definitely had penguins for almost 30 minutes now, so it is when most of the penguins would have crossed the beach already on their way home, but we will still keep counting for about another 20 minutes or so, as those last dribs and drabs of penguins are coming across the beach. So do tune in on Wednesday and let us know how many penguins you think came home tonight, because we are nearing the end of our live stream tonight. So we do urge you to join us on Wednesday, and then we will just be doing special live streams after that. So we will miss you guys, and I hope to see you back on the live stream soon, but we do also want to see everyone here in person as soon as possible. So if you do come and you see one of the rangers you recognize, come and say hi. We love seeing all of you in person. And if you can't come visit us, you can help out by donating to the Penguin Foundation. And thank you to those school kids watching tonight, and thank you for adopting a penguin. Rocky, I hope you spotted Rocky making his way home across the rocks tonight, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. But thank you so much for watching Live Penguin TV tonight, and I think we'll leave you all with a huck off, shall we, Danny?
We shall.
Okay, bye everybody.